Thank you, young man, for your help. C. What happened, Mom? I'll take you to the hospital. A young man hurried toward the most important interview of his life. The rain was pouring down, and his shirt was getting soaked with every step, but he still held on to the hope of a better future. Then, at a bus stop, he saw an elderly woman sitting in a puddle, shivering and too weak to get up. People avoided her, as if her frailty simply didn't exist. He stopped, never imagining that this gesture would change his destiny forever. The morning was dark. Cars left trails of water as young Luis quickened his pace toward the building where he would be interviewed. He had prepared for this moment for weeks, but the weather seemed to be conspiring against him. In front of the bus stop, he saw an elderly woman trying to get up from a puddle. Her blue coat was soaked, and she was breathing with difficulty. Luis hesitated for a second. He knew he was running out of time, but his conscience weighed more heavily. He turned around and ran toward her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. The old woman tried to smile, but could barely manage a murmur that she was weak. Luis took off his own jacket to cover her, even though he was shivering from the cold, and without hesitation, he hoisted her onto his back to carry her to safety. The rain was falling harder, pounding against Luis's back as he carried the old woman on his shoulders. The slippery pavement made each step more difficult, but he remained determined. She clung to his wet shirt, her eyes closed with exhaustion. At the corner, a luxury car screeched to a halt. A well-dressed man rushed out in the rain, looking alarmed at the old woman. "Mom!" he cried, recognizing her. Luis stopped, surprised by the stranger's reaction. The man inspected his mother and then looked at Luis with a mixture of concern and gratitude. "What happened?" he asked firmly. Luis explained briefly, making light of the situation. He just wanted to make sure the old woman was all right. The man helped his mother into the car, but she insisted in taking Luis's hand. "He helped me when no one else would," he whispered in a Dobris, in Saiv, Luis, thread of a voice. Luis smiled shyly, without imagining who this person really was. The man introduced himself as Arturo and offered him a ride so he wouldn't get any more soaked. Luis politely declined. He had to get to an urgent interview. Arturo looked at him again attentively, recognizing his determination. "Which company?" he asked curiously. Luis mentioned the name, trying to hide his anxiety. Arturo was silent for a moment, as if an oxyodrine. Unexpected idea crossed his mind, but before he could say anything, the old woman coughed again, forcing him back behind the wheel. Luis finally arrived at the building, soaked, disheveled, and minutes late. The security guard looked at him suspiciously, as if he couldn't believe that this young man was a candidate. Even so, he let him in, and Luis hurried upstairs to the Human Resources office. Upon arriving, the receptionist looked him up and down. His wet clothes seemed to be proof enough to disqualify him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Luis. The interview is over," she said coldly. Luis swallowed, trying to explain the situation, but she interrupted him listlessly. "The manager is very strict about punctuality." Luis lowered his gaze, feeling the opportunity he so desperately needed slipping away, and without another word, he left the building under the cold lights of the hallway. By the time he reached the street, the rain had lessened, but the feeling of defeat weighed even more heavily. Luis sat down under a makeshift roof, mentally replaying each decision. "Maybe I should have kept walking," he murmured, though he knew he wouldn't be able to. His mother had always taught him that helping was a duty, even if it had consequences. As, he thought, his phone vibrated with a notification. It was an unexpected message. "Return to the building. General management. Do you wish to see him immediately?" Luis felt a lump in his throat. He didn't understand what was happening, but he decided to go back. His heart pounded as he climbed the steps again. Something had changed, though he didn't yet know what. The receptionist looked at him, confused, when he returned, but he had no choice but to let him in. He led him to a private elevator, something Luis had never imagined using. Upon reaching the top floor, two tall doors slowly opened. The office was imposing, with windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Seated behind the desk was Arturo, the same man who had found his mother in the rain. Luis stood motionless, trying to process the coincidence. Arturo stood up with a warm smile. "I was expecting you," he said. Luis felt a chill as he realized who he really was. He was standing before the CEO of the company. Arturo offered him a seat, and Luis accepted with trembling hands. "My mother is fine, thanks to you. If you hadn't helped her, I don't want to imagine what would have happened," the CEO explained. Luis shook his head quickly. "Anyone would have done it, sir." Arturo chuckled softly. "Believe me, no, not just anyone." Luis took a deep breath. Still worried about the failed interview, Arturo noticed and walked to the window. "You went to the interview, didn't you?" he asked. Luis nodded, embarrassed. "And they rejected you for being late," Arturo finished, his tone more serious. Luis was speechless, his hands clasped on his knees. Arturo approached and placed a dossier on the table. "This was your file. It came into my hands by chance," Luis remarked. He looked at it, surprised by the coincidence. The SEO continued, "I see effort, I see sacrifice, I see a hunger to learn." Luis felt a slight tremor in his voice. "I just want a chance." Arturo stared at him, as if evaluating not his resume, but his heart. "That's what I told my son when he was young, but he never understood what it means to help." Luis lowered his gaze, unsure how to respond. A tense silence filled the air, broken only by the rain tapping against the window, until Arturo decided to break it with a simple sentence. "Luis, I want to know something," Arturo said. "If you could go back, knowing you would lose this interview, would you help my mother again?" Luis hesitated for a few seconds, but his answer was honest. "Yes, sir. I would do it anyway." Arturo smiled contentedly, as if that answer confirmed what he already suspected. "So, you're the kind of person I want in my company," he declared, firmly. Luis's eyes widened, incredulous. "Is he saying," he asked with restrained hope. "Yes," Arturo replied. "I'm offering you the job, not out of pity, but because of your character." Luis felt an enormous weight lift from his chest. Arturo walked him to the exit, explaining that human resources would contact him to coordinate his joining the company. Luis still couldn't believe what was happening. As they walked down the hallway, Arturo smiled. "My mother wants to see you," he insisted, wanting to thank him personally. Luis felt a warmth spread through his chest. That frail woman he had carried in the rain was now the reason for his new opportunity. The elderly woman was sitting in a wheelchair. She extended her hand gently. "Thank you, son. No one had been this kind to me in a long time." Luis leaned down to hug her, deeply moved. The old woman took his hands, still feeling the dampness on his clothes. "You're a good young man. Don't lose that kindness for anything in the world," she said, her voice trembling. Luis couldn't help but be moved. Behind her, Arturo watched the scene with pride. "My mother always told me that people are known by their actions, not their words." Luis looked up, his eyes shining. "I only did what anyone would do," he repeated, even though they both knew it wasn't true. Arturo placed a hand on his shoulder. "Life always gives back what you give, Luis." And in that moment, the young man believed it for the first time. As they left the building, the rain had finally stopped, leaving a grey sky illuminated by the first rays of the sun. Luis took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. He had lost an interview, but he had gained something much more valuable, a real opportunity built not on a resume, but on a selfless act. As she walked along the wet sidewalk, she remembered her mother and her childhood words. "The world may be tough, but never be tough." Luis smiled discreetly. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he had done the right thing, and that life, for the first time in a long time, was offering him a glimmer of hope. Luis understood that real opportunities don't always come wrapped in immediate success, but rather in difficult decisions that reveal who you truly are. Helping the elderly woman cost him an interview, but it opened up an unexpected path. He discovered that kindness remains a powerful value. Even in a fast-paced and selfish world, Arturo saw in him what many refused to see: an honest heart. And the elderly woman, in her frailty, reminded him that the smallest acts can change entire lives. Luis walked toward his future with renewed hope, because he understood that when you do good, sooner or later, life returns the favor.